Endogenic processes we have completed with it, but still the part of geomorphic processes is left, that is the exogenic forces. Exogenic forces is the external forces of the earth that act on the surface, and it is primarily due to the processes of the thermal condition and gravity of the earth. It is influenced by the denudation, which is the weathering, erosion, transportation, and the mass wasting. Weathering means the breaking of the rocks. Erosion means their removal or totally gets destroyed. And transportation, it gets carried. And mass wasting, for example, due to the gravity of the earth, which, for example, if I take the example of the glacier in mass wasting, if a glacier coming from the higher altitude to the lower altitude, because of the gravity, mass wasting is totally depends on the gravity of the earth. Weathering, it is also known as in situ, because weathering is the breaking of the rocks on the place of their origin, that is, it is known as in situ breakdown. And weathering of the rocks is influenced by the vegetation, climatic condition, and the vegetation it covers. Weathering is mainly of three types: physical, mechanical, chemical, and biological. Physical, mechanical, the factor of its are heat and frost. Heat when the rocks get expanded, and in frost when the rocks get contracted. And it mostly occurs in the dry areas and in the higher altitude areas. In dry areas where heat is very much, and in higher altitude where frost occurs. Chemical, like hydration, oxidation, carbonation. Hydration, when minerals absorb the water and its volume increases. Oxidation, when the air gets reacts with the oxygen, the rust gets formed. Carbonation, when the carbonic acids gets washed away by the rainwater. For example, if I talk about the limestone gets washed easily by the rainwater. That is example of the carbonation, and it's mainly seen in subtropical areas. Biological, like the tree roots or the burrowing of the animals. Tree roots, the roots are tightly holding the soil, and hence the soil develops the cracks, right? So that is a biological. And in burrowing by animals, while creating a burrow, animals, what happens, lots of soil particles or the rocks get disintegrated or weathered, right? And it is mostly found in the vegetated area where the trees are very much in quantity. Forest areas. Exfoliation is the process. If I compare this with the onion has a layers, right? As example, rocks also have the layer. Due to the heat the and the cooling down of the temperatures, rocks loses its the outermost layers, that is the exfoliation. The outer layers of the rocks come out due to the thermal condition, that is the exfoliation. Always remember, with the heat rocks get expand, and with the cold rocks get squeezed or contraction happens. Process of the exogenic processes is the mass wasting. Mass wasting generally happens due to the gravitational force, like the uh, slipping down of the glacier from higher altitude to the lower altitude. This is happening due to the gravity of the earth, and it's also of the two types: slow movements and the rapid movements. Slow movements, soil creep, when the soil move to the downhill in a very slow motion. And soily fluctuation, that is happens in the moist areas. uh, that is the example of the permafrost. When some snow, when some accumulation of ice that move to the downslope. Means soil creep is related to the dry areas and soily fluctuations related to the moist areas. But the two conditions derive from the slipping down of from higher altitude to the lower altitude, and rapid movements, earth flow and mud flow. If we see in the heavy rainfall, right, in the mountainous areas, how does the soil get washed away, right? It is flowing from upper altitude to the lower altitude. How is it? For example, if we visiting in mountainous areas, like while going to the Missouri or no, I'm taking the example of Missouri. We can see that the we can see that the mud is flowing, right, in a heavy rainfall conditions, or in the flood area, in the flood condition, right? The mud flows from higher altitude to the lower altitude. We can also see the runoff of the water with the soil, with the mud. Landslides and rock falls, big boulders when gets fall away from the higher altitude to the lower altitude, and landslides when the rocks get weakened due to the heavy absorption of the water, when the rocks is not stable to when the soil is not stable to hold. So what happens, the lands become weak and it's get slipped away. That is a landslide. That is mainly occurs in the higher altitude areas. That is a rapid movements.